Today, let's start with a small, quick exercise. If I ask you to fill, I believe God is dash, what comes to your mind? You can have as many thoughts as possible, and if you want, you can also write it down. And today, this verse 21 is all about defining what God is or who God is. Let's take this journey and see what Laotzu talks about God. Hi, welcome back to Oneness. Today is day 21 and we will be looking at verse 21 from Taoteching. As usual, before we begin, let's observe a few seconds of silence. Thank you. So now let's look at verse 21. The greatest virtue is to follow Tao and Tao alone. The Tao is elusive and intangible. Oh, it is intangible and elusive, and yet within is image. Oh, it is elusive and intangible, and yet within is form. Oh, it is dim and dark, and yet within is essence. This essence is very real, and therein lies faith. From the very beginning until now, its name has never been forgotten. Thus I perceive creation. How do I know the ways of creation? Because of this. So let's observe a moment to sink in with this verse. So, in the beginning, I asked you to fill in, I believe God is dash. So, before starting this video, I recorded and I made note of what the thoughts that came to my mind. So, first I said, God is creative force / creator. God is love. God is everywhere and in everything. God is supreme consciousness. And God is a cosmic being. So these are the top 5 things I wrote. And then I asked myself, whatever I wrote, is it defining God himself, or it is his nature or behavior or something else like an attribute? What it is? So for an example, when I said God is creative force or a creator, I'm referring to his action, being a creator. And when I say God is love, I'm referring to his nature of being with love. And when I said God is everywhere and everything, I'm talking about his presence. And when I talk about God as supreme consciousness, I'm talking about a supreme as an adjective, an attribute that he has over us, like a supreme consciousness. And when I say God is cosmic being, I'm talking about his where he belongs. But nowhere all this definition, or I believe God is doing justice to who God is, or his godly nature. All we can all see is an outside form, or his attributes, his behavior, his nature, but not truly who he is. And that's why if someone asks who his God is, I might say God is an unperceivable or intangible, ununderstandable being which is beyond our senses. And it also, the word God, I believe it is a different name that we are referring to the same thing. Probably any definition that is known to human being. It can be any name that we refer to as God. It can be any God, and any form of God, any being of God, and anything that we define, all sum it up is God. And what it is, probably that is a question to ponder for you and me. So with that, let's try to understand what Laotzu means in this verse. The greatest virtue is to follow Tao and Tao alone. So here, I believe when he says Tao, he means God. So it can be your belief of what God is. And the Tao itself means the way, and the way of nature. he doesn't talk about one single being as Tao, or he doesn't talk about one simple form as Tao. He says the way of nature as Tao. So that also brings us to try to understand the creation or God. And the other way to look at the whole idea of God is from a viewpoint of sacred geometry. So the sacred geometry is about creation and a manifestation of single consciousness into everything that we see as the world and as a cosmos. So behind me you will see a painting that is, by the way, painted by myself, and that is sacred geometry. In sacred geometry, the root goes like this. In the beginning, there is nothing. It's absolute darkness. And there is one consciousness which floats beyond time and space, because both time and space are relative to each other, as well as it has to be related with something else. Right? There is no right or left or top or down. There is nothing. There is no direction. It is void. It's complete void. And there is consciousness. And one day, the consciousness decides to expand. And how it expands? It expands in all directions equally as a first circle. From a point, you draw one circle. And now, all the consciousness knows is to go to the boundary of that first circle. And then it expands again. And then go to the intersection, again it expands. Likewise, if you take all the intersection and draw a circle again, there will be 7 circles. And that, in Christianity, some call it as the 7 days of creation. So that also matches with that. And from that, if you keep expanding, that comes a flower of life. And there is a seed of life, the fruit of life, and etc. So instead of me going deeper into sacred geometry, and that is the meaning of sacred geometry in the first place, the consciousness expanding and ever creating. With that thought, let's look at science. So we know that the Big Bang is the beginning of all creation, as the science says. But what leads to the Big Bang? So what science says is there is a single minute dot which is much more smaller than a tip of a needle, much smaller. There is a volume is so less and the density is so high, it busted into Big Bang. And that hence created everything. So that's what science says. But then in anything that we see as a matter and dark matter and particles and electrons and protons are all created after that. So in the scientific way of looking as well, so what was the thing that was there within that minute dot? That's something to think about. And science is still wondering and still exploring. And it is fair that they also explore in their way that they know to them, in a physical way. So with that, let's go deeper into the verse. The Tao is elusive and intangible. So here, Laotzu is talking about Tao being elusive and intangible. So how I see it is, the true nature, it is not perceivable by our senses. All we know is our vision, our sight. It can only see a limited wavelength of light. It cannot see everything. And that's why we invented infrared telescope, an ultraviolet telescope to see into the deep space. Because with a normal telescope, we cannot see all the light waves. So that's why even our sense of eye, something can be right in front of us, but we can be still blind because it will be out of range wavelength for the human eye. The same thing for our ears as well. The frequency, what we can hear, is limited. So there are subtle frequencies which the human mind or our ears cannot even sense it. So all our senses are limited to even perceive the whole nature. So that's why the Tao is elusive and intangible comes in. And the next 3 lines are, oh, it is intangible and elusive and yet within image. Oh, elusive and intangible and yet within his form. Oh, it is dim and dark and yet within his essence. Here in these 3 lines, the 3 key words are image, form and essence. So the image, I refer it as a creative code or consciousness. What I mean by consciousness is, in human beings, we have a DNA, which says exactly how we look. For an example, why my nose has to stop here? Why not grow longer, like here? Or why my fingers has to be proportionate? Why not like, it can just grow all over the place, like, tall. So everything follows a divine proportion. That I call it as a creative code. And that here is image. And then he talks about form. So what do you mean by form? I call it as a shape. A knowledge of physical shape, how it has to look. And finally, it comes essence. I refer that as an energy. Because as we know, Tao is both name and nameless. As a named, it is mother of all things, as a creation. As a nameless, it is an origin. So here, what I'm referring is, it is everything put together at one creative source, which got energy, which got the mind, which is consciousness, and it also has a form within it. That's how I interpret these 3 lines. Then it goes, this essence is very real and therein lies faith. So that essence can be breath. That essence, when we said as a soul, energy, breath, spirit that we can breathe in, which can give life to every single human beings or living things and non-living things, that is the whole soul of it. And from very beginning until now, its name has never been forgotten. Yes, the true name of the whole creation was never forgotten. Yes, as a one point in time, human beings, we are unable to understand the nature. So we have to create different forms, and that's why we created it. There is nothing right or wrong, right? So now, even understanding and accepting as a formless being, it is good. We can be with the state of formless being, right? We don't have to put a label as God and this God is this and define him again. Instead, we can accept the ancient being, the ancient creation as it is, even if it is not perceivable to us. We can accept that. And finally, he goes, thus I perceive creation. How do I know the ways of creation? Because of this. So when he finished the whole verse with because of this, I see it as he's pointing out to himself. This, the body. And the body, he means not Laotzu's body, but within him. In my understanding, within every one of us, there is this invisible force that what we are seeking outwards lies within. And that's what I like to say, that instead of seeing God as a being, we should see God as a state to be in. I repeat again. Instead of seeing God as a being, we should see a God as a state to be in. It is a state which is within us, which is ever changing. It is always present. All it takes is to a moment of silence to connect with that state within. And that state is not definable. Like God's nature, it is not definable. For that matter, any emotion or a state is not definable. For an example, though we can say, oh, I am happy, you are happy, or you're sad, I am sad. We can even empathize and sympathize and all those things, but we cannot truly understand the happiness of the other person. We can feel happy, but then whether both the happiness will be same if you can compare, I'm sure it is not possible to compare because there are different levels altogether. Even we cannot quantify it with some numbers, right? So even if someone can say, answer it between 1 to 10, how happy you are, we can have to trust our instinct to answer it, not by some scientific method to answer it. Even if there is a scientific method comes to, say, measure happiness, we cannot match that happiness with the other person. We cannot create with the other person the same happiness. So likewise, the state of being in the state which is of God, it is a state that we all have within and which is not describable. That's fine. Accept it and be with it. And that's how I see this whole verse 21 as the mysterious nature of Tao, creation, God. Whatever we name it, the eternal truth remains the same. And it always present within us, and all it takes is a moment of silence to connect within and feel the God within us. So with that, we come to the conclusion of verse 21. And I like to share uh, written was from Hafiz, and this is from the book Change Your Thought, Change Your Life. So I quickly read that for you because it is so beautiful. It also defines about the nature of God, and this is from this book, Change Your Thought, Change Your Life. If you think that the truth can be known from words, if you think that the sun and the ocean can pass through the tiny opening called mouth, oh, someone should start laughing. Someone should start wildly laughing now. So beautiful it is. Here he clearly talks about we cannot put words to express the truth or to describe the truth. How we cannot talk about the ocean and sun with our tiny mouth and just describe it and say it out. No, it is not possible. So likewise, the eternal truth is always there. Though instead of searching somewhere else with the different forms and formulas, if we connect within, we can sense the same thing, the same God within us as well, as a state to be in. So with that, let's move on to one actionable thought. So the one actionable thought for today is spend time in silence. Just try to connect yourself with your understanding of what God is or who God is. And try to understand and question your own self. Am I defining God himself as a person, or is nature and attributes and behavior what it is? And how can I connect within myself to reach a state of God within? Just ponder with this thought. I'm sure the answer will come to you, and that way you will be guided to look within, and hence you look God within. So with that, let's end day 21, and thank you so much.